Hello, greetings, everybody. My name is James. I am from the internet. Today we are going to be talking about critical race theory. Now, if you have no idea what critical race theory is, don't feel bad, because literally until 2 years ago, absolutely nobody knew what the hell this was. It came out of left field. It was an academic term. It was something that academics discussed amongst themselves, especially in places of higher education. But of course, because the conservative outrage machine every 2 to 4 years needs something new in the culture wars to latch onto and tell baseline white Christian people that they need to fear this thing because it's going to be the end of society as they know it, well then, now everybody keeps hearing about critical race theory. And don't worry, because before this, it was worry about flag burning being unpatriotic. And before this, it was worry about cultural Marxism. And before that, it was you should be worried about the crack wars. And before that, it was you should be worried about gang violence. And before that, it was you should be really, really concerned that your kids don't get hopped up on the old jazz cabbage. Yes, conservatives have been stoking the flames of fear and racism for as long as there have been conservatives in politics in the United States of America. Now, the shit just travels at the speed of light and gets magnified because of the oversaturation of social media. So, what I wanted to do today was number 1, tell you all what critical race theory actually is. Number 2, let you know if anybody's actually teaching it. Number 3, if you should be concerned. And number 4, I'm going to explain to you the real reason why whiteness is so threatened by critical race theory. Here we go. So let's kick it off. What is critical race theory, and is it actually taught in schools? Should you be concerned right now if you are a white person who is deeply steeped in whiteness? Should you be concerned that your adorable little children who are dressed up in clothing solely made up of the colors of the American flag are going to be taught communism in school? Are they going to get radicalized by, Nancy Pelosi and the radical left, who I have been led to believe is actually the high commander of the Antifa super soldiers, which is pretty wild considering that she's a landlord worth $70 million, but I digress. Let's find out some facts. Critical race theory is a way of thinking about America's history through the lens of racism. Scholars developed it during the 1970s and 1980s in response to what they viewed as a lack of racial progress following the civil rights legislation of the 1960s. It centers on the idea that racism is systemic in the nation's institutions and that they function to maintain the dominance of white people in society. In other words, white supremacy. People don't want to say or write those words together because it makes people get offended. It makes people question themselves, and then they get really angry and hit the report button. And by the way, this is what we call foreshadowing, because I know what's going to happen 3 hours after this video is released. Y'all aren't very creative, but I gotta hand it to you. You're consistent in smashing the report button while you scream about cancel culture and snowflakes. The architects of the theory argue that the United States was founded on the theft of land and labor, and that federal law has preserved the unequal treatment of people on the basis of race. Proponents also believe race is culturally invented, not biological. Now, there are a number of things in this opening paragraph that I have covered multiple times, just not in this context. For example, there is no white race. When people ask you where you're from or where your family's from, you don't say my parents and grandparents are from the nation of white from a small village called Whiteyville. So yes, race is a construct, unless of course you can point to the map and show me where Whiteyville in the nation of whiteness is. Number 2, yes, laws and practices are institutionalized, even today still used, that are heavily racist. If you have any questions, please look at every single city in the United States of America where the police formally adopted the stop and frisk philosophy. And lastly, yes, this country was founded and built upon stolen land and slave labor. In fact, were it not for the fact that we had so many slaves who then were eventually freed and were still essentially slaves as sharecroppers or landless people with no money who were forced to work in the fields, only they couldn't be hung indiscriminately without at least a cursory police investigation. Yeah, if it wasn't for all of those people being forced to grow all that food in the South, well then, our military would not have been well provisioned enough to go across the country and slaughter all the indigenous folks. So yes, quite literally, this country is built on stolen land, and that was done due to the fact that Black people were forced to labor to drive the expansion. None of this, historically speaking, is in doubt. These are all facts. Now, is critical race theory being taught in schools? Do you have to be concerned that little 6-year-old Becky is going to be taught in class that she is racist? Apparently, this is a fear that people have. Oh, that's right, because this is the fear that's being sold to them by all the politicians who keep screaming, critical race theory, critical race theory. It's usually just before they start chanting MAGA, 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 or lock her up, lock her up. Yeah. They really love the classics over there in Whiteyville. There is little to no evidence that critical race theory itself is being taught in K through 12th grade public schools, though some ideas central to it, such as lingering consequences of slavery, have been. You know, history. Republicans in North Carolina point to the Wake County public school system as an example, saying that teachers participated in a professional development session on critical race theory. County education officials canceled a future study session once it was discovered, but insist the theory is not part of its classroom curriculum. Yes, educators, intellectuals, academics, they get together and meet and discuss things. It's called academics. So why am I bringing this up now? Well, over the weekend, Crypt Keeper and Human Jesus ghoul Pat Robertson hit the airwaves on his whatever fucking Christian podcast show, give me money so I can pray for you through the internet thing he has going on, dropped a real whopper, and he said the quiet part out loud. And honestly, this right here, this is where the true fear comes from.
What is it that the people of color have been oppressed by the white people, and the white people begin to be racist by the time they're 2 or 3 months old, and therefore the people of color have to rise up and overtake their oppressors, and then, having gotten the whip handle, if I can use that term, then to instruct their white neighbors how to behave. Now that's critical race theory.
There you go, everybody. Pat Robertson saying the quiet part out loud. Pat Robertson is freaked out that if you tell Black people the unmitigated truth of just how systemically racist America was and still is, that they would literally rise up and take the whip handle away from the white folk, even though slavery has been outlawed for hundreds of years. Pat Robertson and white conservatives still think in terms of whiteness and blackness as slaves and slave masters. And now I take you to the witch hunt portion of the program. The website Critical Race Training and Education is a website that is supposed to be a utility for parents, created by a conservative. And what it does is it tracks schools in every single state that teach critical race theory so that you, as a parent, can be well informed and make sure to not send your white child to some questionable school where they might teach things like stop and frisk is racist and it still happens today. We can't have that, no! So this website is a utility to root out the radical liberals and their agenda. Let's take a look at what schools you should avoid sending your adorable little children to. As you can see, it is an extensive database of hundreds and hundreds of places where supposedly they are teaching critical race theory. However, of note is the fact that not one single high school is on this list. It's all colleges and universities, where they teach academia and theory, and they talk about history in multiple levels. It's almost as if critical race theory is actually not being introduced in your schools, but conservatives and Republicans want you to fear that it is so that you will go out and vote, because nothing, and I mean nothing, drives conservatives to the polls quicker than fear of the collapse of conservatism. And for the record, if critical race theory were taught in schools, this is the kind of thing it would teach. It would teach the difference between the whitewashed version of history that we currently teach, which is steeped in patriotism, while ignoring imperialism, colonialism, and white supremacy. Yeah, we can't have any of that, right? No. We can't challenge that current version of history with the actual reality of what happened. And ultimately, that is what we're trying to avoid. A generation of people who might ask why we still do shitty racist things today after discovering just how many shitty racist things we've been doing every year up until now, not just back in the slavery plantation days. Now, I wish I could tell you that something this cut and dry was going to come and go since it's so ridiculous, but it's not going to. This is going to be the linchpin issue for Republicans for the next 3 years. It allows them to plug into the primal Donald Trump fan MAGA rage without having to actually say the words Donald Trump. It allows conservative Republicans to completely steal away the evangelical Christians from the MAGA world and still get their votes without having to kowtow to President Donald Trump. Oh, wait, I'm sorry, that's former one-term President Donald Trump. But no matter how much of a wedge issue they try to make this, I want everybody to understand very clearly. The reason why introducing fear of critical race theory was so simple and why it's become so prevalent is this one very simple fact. White people who have read history, they understand just how shitty and just how horrible centuries of slavery was. And in their heads, they can't get around the fact that if they were black people and they had been enslaved for hundreds of years, and then after being freed from slavery, they were still discriminated against by everybody around them and every system they were forced to operate within, well then, they wouldn't be looking for equality, they would be looking for revenge. And it's that internalized belief that taps into the fear that all people of color will react as badly as these individual white people believe that they would react to the same news. So don't believe the hype, people. Learn history. Learn facts. History isn't racist. Trying to ban the teaching of facts because it offends race sensibilities? Well, that's just another example of systemic racism. Until next time, my name is James. I am from the internet and I am out. Peace.